We are joined now with Governor Josh Shapiro via satellite in Harrisburg. Governor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jordan.
So, of course, you had your big budget address for the second year now here. A lot of the focus on the budget was about investment. Tell me why it was important to focus on this during this budget address.
We're at an important moment in this Commonwealth where we need to make critical investments, and we've got the resources to do that. We're sitting on a $14 billion surplus. My budget is balanced. It actually cuts taxes. It doesn't raise them. And even if you adopt everything I propose, we'd still have about an $11 billion surplus at the end of that. What I want to do is invest in creating more of a competitive environment here in Pennsylvania, creating more opportunity. What does that look like? Investing more in our public schools. Johnstown, for example, would get an 18% increase to their schools under my budget proposal. Investing in public safety, investing in economic development, growing our workforce, making college more affordable. These are things we can do in a fiscally responsible way. As I said, cut taxes, not raise them, be able to reduce people's costs, not increase them. But now is a moment for us to compete and for us to win in Pennsylvania.
Obviously, investment requires spending. Your Republican counterparts in the House and Senate have voiced their displeasure with the spending. The President pro temp of the Senate, Kim Ward, called it unicorns and rainbows and will lead to tax increases. It's been called unaffordable, irresponsible, and misleading. The House Republicans said it was a phishing scam because of what would lead to tax increases in the future. So I want to ask you, Governor, obviously you said no tax increases for this year with this budget address, but does your increase in spending leave the potential for increases down the line?
No. And Jordan, look, I get the fact that there's some people who feel like it's their job to just professionally disagree with everything I put forth because we're a different party. Well, I don't work that way. I try and bring Republicans and Democrats together around thoughtful, common sense, bipartisan, responsible investments. And let's be very clear. I'm the only one in the building that has to put forth a 5-year budget plan. Lawmakers don't have to do that. They just do it year after year. And nowhere in that 5-year budget plan is there a tax increase. In fact, we maintain a balance in our rainy day fund. I think these lawmakers who are opposed to what I put forth really have to answer 2 questions. The first is, well, what's your idea? And the second is, are you okay with an unconstitutional public education system, which is what we have? Are you okay being 49th in the nation in higher education, which is where we are? Are you okay continuously losing to our neighbors like Ohio or New York when it comes to economic development? I'm not okay with any of that. I want to compete. I want to win. I want to bet on the good people of Pennsylvania. I believe in them, and now is the time to make these responsible investments. As I said a moment ago, if you did everything I proposed, and Jordan, I understand there'll be some give and take, but just for argument's sake, if you did everything I proposed in my budget, you'd still have an $11 billion surplus and you'd cut taxes. This is fiscally responsible. Now is the time to act, to stop saying no just because your political talking points are no, and instead bet on the good people of Pennsylvania.
Governor, let's talk about that education increase, $1.1 billion. I know a lot of your Republican counterparts will ask about this increase in the way of throwing money at an issue, but will there be results? So how can you ensure that in the investment that you're willing to make and the way that you're going to make it will make sure that we will see growth in the education for our children in the Commonwealth?
A year ago, our courts here in Pennsylvania ruled that we have an unconstitutional system of funding public education. Republicans had the opportunity to appeal that ruling, basically to say they disagreed with it and ask for another review. None of them appealed. They accepted the remedy of the court. And what the court said was that we need to do 2 things. Number 1, invest more in public education. And number 2, drive those investments out in a more equitable way, meaning the districts that need the most get more, right? You follow? And so that's why in this budget, we do propose to invest $1.1 billion in new investments in our schools. About $900 million of that would go to schools like Johnstown that have been chronically underfunded. They would see an 18% increase in our schools in Johnstown. And to make sure that we're getting results, we're investing in the things that really matter to our students, whether it's mental health or helping students who need a little bit more support by investing more in special ed, just to name two things. A third, which is important in your region, is investing in aging school buildings and having a new fund for facilities. My proposal targets the schools that have the most need. They would continue to have to meet those metrics and report back to the Department of Education on the progress of their teachers and their students. Now is the time to make these investments. Republicans and Democrats all agreed to that to that Commonwealth Court ruling, and now it's time to act, and my proposed budget does just that.
I just have two more things for you here, Governor. The first, staying with education. When it comes to higher ed, I know you talked about the combining of community colleges as well as the PASHE schools, but I want to take a little focus on something that affects us here in Central PA. Places like Penn State and Pitt have Commonwealth campuses that impact our region directly, like Penn State Altoona, as well as Penn State Du Bois, Pitt Johnstown, for example. When you increase the funding for some of the larger campuses like Pitt, like Penn State, how can we ensure that these Commonwealths that provide such a great service to our local rural students don't get left behind in that increase?
Well, those campuses are outstanding, and I want the universities to maintain those. That's obviously going to be a decision made by their university boards and by the university presidents. But understand, I'm proposing that we increase funding for schools like Pitt and Penn State, and hopefully some of that gets driven out into those Commonwealth campuses, into those satellite campuses. And for those of you who are watching this who are saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to Pitt or Penn State. I don't have a loved one going there. What do I get out of this? Well, for the first time, I'm proposing we not only increase funding for those schools, but we actually pay for performance. We pay for outcomes. So we will now be measuring a Penn State or Pitt, as just two examples, based on whether or not they meet the metrics that we lay out, like how many people who graduate from their institutions stay in Pennsylvania. How many folks graduate with, say, a nursing degree? We all agree we need more nurses or more teachers. So we're incentivizing certain outcomes that are going to benefit the broader public here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We think that is really important to not just write a blank check, but to focus on performance. And I'm really pleased that the leadership of Pitt and Penn State, along with all the other universities, have embraced this idea of paying for performance.
Last question for you, Governor. I want to talk about gun violence and the Office of Gun Violence that you're proposing to establish in the state. What do you think that office can accomplish? Obviously, with divided government, gun control and those type of legislation probably unlikely to pass a divided government. What type of teeth would an Office of Gun Violence actually be able to have?
Well, we would be only the second state in the nation, I believe, to have an Office of Gun Violence, which will channel all of our different resources on investing in programs on the ground in, say, Johnstown or other communities that are doing good work to keep, guns out of the hands of kids or guns away from criminals, focusing on, safer solutions in our communities. That's to go along with the historic investments that I have made in the past and proposing to make again in our Pennsylvania State Police and other municipal law enforcement. We need more law enforcement in our communities to address the unacceptable level of violence. We need to invest in our schools to make sure that our young people have outlets that are safe for them and accessible to them. Understand that the Office of Gun Violence is one important piece of a broader puzzle. We need to make those investments at the community level with law enforcement in our schools, and by doing all of that work together and focusing our attention on that, I believe we can chip away at the violence that we're seeing, the unacceptable levels of violence that we're seeing here in the Johnstown, Altoona area and all across Pennsylvania.
Governor, as always, thank you so much for the conversation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jordan.